You know what nobody tells you about awakening? That you'll still get lost. That you'll still have days where nothing makes sense. Where the clarity you once had seems like a distant dream. Where you look around and think, wait, I'm supposed to understand all this, aren't I? Here's the funny thing. The cosmic joke, if you will. Most people think that awakening is some kind of destination. Some final state where confusion ends and certainty begins, where you arrive at the mountaintop and suddenly everything is clear and you never have to climb again. But that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. I'll let you in on a secret. The awakened person gets lost too. They feel confused. They experience doubt. They have moments where they can't find their way. The difference isn't that they never get lost. The difference is what they do when it happens. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because if you've been on this path for any length of time, you've probably noticed something strange. You've had glimpses, moments of profound clarity where everything made sense, where you saw through the illusion, touched something real, felt the ground of being beneath your feet. And then, just as quickly, you lost it. The clarity faded, the confusion returned, and you found yourself thinking, what happened? Did I do something wrong? Was it all just a fantasy? Most people panic when this happens. They grasp. They try to get back to that state of clarity through force of will. They read more books, attend more retreats, meditate harder, searching desperately for what they think they've lost. But here's what they don't understand. Here's what nobody tells you. You can't lose what you never had. And you can't find what was never lost. Let me explain what's really happening when you feel lost. When that clarity seems to fade and confusion takes its place. What you're experiencing isn't the loss of awakening. It's not a step backward or a failure. It's something far more interesting than that. You see, we have this idea that awakening should feel a certain way. Peaceful, clear, certain, blissful. And when we don't feel that way, when the fog rolls in and we can't see the path ahead, we assume something's gone wrong. We've fallen asleep again. We've lost the thread. We're back at square one. But think about it. Who is it that's worried about being lost? Who is this one that's afraid they've lost their awakening? Is it the awakened awareness itself? Or is it the mind, the ego, the sense of separate self that's trying to possess awakening like it would possess anything else? The problem isn't that you're lost. The problem is that you think being lost is a problem. You think there's somewhere you're supposed to be that isn't here. Some state you're supposed to be in that isn't this one. Some level of understanding you're supposed to have that you don't. This is what I call the second trap. The first trap is believing you're just this separate self, this ego moving through time, trying to survive and succeed. That's what most people are caught in. But the second trap, the one that catches seekers and spiritual practitioners, is believing that awakening is another achievement, another state to attain and maintain, another trophy to add to the collection of the self. And so you get lost not in life, but in the idea that you shouldn't be lost. You suffer not from confusion, but from the belief that you should be clear. You struggle not with the present moment, but with your concepts about what the present moment should feel like. Let me tell you something. I've met countless people on this path, some who meditate for hours every day, some who've had profound experiences, mystical visions, moments of cosmic consciousness, and you know what? They all get lost sometimes. They all have days where they can't find the thread, where nothing makes sense, where they wonder if they know anything at all. The ones who are truly awake, though, they don't panic when this happens. They don't grasp. They don't try to force their way back to clarity. Instead, they do something that seems almost paradoxical. They get curious about being lost. They turn toward the confusion instead of away from it. They ask, what is this? What's really happening here? Because here's the thing. When you're willing to be completely lost, when you stop trying to find your way back to some imagined state of clarity, something remarkable happens. You discover that being lost isn't what you thought it was. It's not the opposite of finding. It's not a problem to be solved. It's simply another experience arising in awareness, another wave on the ocean, another color in the spectrum of being. Now let's go deeper, because what I'm about to tell you might sound strange at first, but stay with me. The feeling of being lost is actually one of the most valuable experiences you can have on this path. Not in spite of the confusion, but because of it. You see, every time you feel lost, every time the clarity fades and the confusion returns, you're being given an invitation, an opportunity to see something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. But most people miss it because they're too busy trying to get back to not being lost. What is this invitation? It's the invitation to notice what remains when everything else falls away, when your concepts about awakening dissolve, when your ideas about who you are and where you're going lose their grip, when you can't find the path, can't feel the ground, can't see the light. What's still here? The awakened person knows this. They know that being lost is actually a purification process. It's life's way of stripping away false certainty, of dissolving the ego's tendency to turn even awakening into another possession, another identity, another source of security. Think about it this way. When you feel clear and certain and awakened, there's a subtle danger. The ego can co-opt that state. It can say, yes, I am awakened, I understand, I've got it figured out. And suddenly, awakening becomes another layer of self-deception, another mask, another role to play. But when you're lost, when you don't know, when you can't figure it out, the ego has nothing to hold on to. There's no state to possess, no achievement to claim, no identity to defend. And in that groundlessness, that not knowing, something authentic can emerge. Not the idea of awakening, not the concept of enlightenment, but the simple, direct recognition of what's actually here. This is why the ancient teachers spoke in paradoxes, why they said things like, not knowing is most intimate, and the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. They were pointing to something that can't be grasped by the seeking mind, something that reveals itself only when seeking stops. But here's where it gets really interesting. The awakened person doesn't just accept being lost passively. They engage with it actively. They become students of confusion, explorers of the unknown. They look directly at the feeling of being lost and ask, what is this made of? Where does this sensation of lostness live? Who is it that feels lost? And when you ask these questions sincerely, when you really look, something extraordinary happens. You discover that the feeling of being lost is just that, a feeling, a sensation in the body, a thought pattern in the mind. It's not actually a statement about reality. It's not actually telling you anything true about where you are or who you are. The sensation of being lost appears in awareness, just like every other experience. It arises, it exists for a moment, and it passes. It's not more real or more significant than the sensation of being found. Neither one is the truth of what you are. They're both just weather patterns moving through the sky of consciousness. You see, the mind creates this narrative. It says, I was awakened, and now I'm lost. I had it, and now I've lost it. I was clear, and now I'm confused. But who is this I that moves through these states? Who is this one that can be awakened or asleep, found or lost, clear or confused? This is the question that changes everything. Not how do I get back to clarity, but who is experiencing this confusion? Not how do I find my way, but who is lost? Because when you look for this one, when you really search for the separate self that's supposedly lost, you can't find it. It's like trying to grasp water. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. And in that discovery, in that recognition that there's no separate self to be lost or found, something relaxes. The urgency dissolves. The panic subsides. Not because you've solved the problem of being lost, but because you've seen through the fiction that there was ever anyone to be lost in the first place. This is what the awakened person does. They don't resist being lost. They don't frantically search for the way back to clarity. Instead, they use the experience of being lost as a mirror. They let it show them where they're still clinging to concepts, still grasping at states, still believing in the story of a separate self that moves through time collecting experiences. So what does this look like in practice? What does an awakened person actually do when they feel lost? First, they stop running. They stop trying to fix it, change it, or get back to somewhere else. They recognize that the impulse to escape is itself part of the pattern, part of the dream. They see that trying to get from lost to found is just the ego doing what it's always done, trying to get from here to there, from this to that, from what is to what should be. Instead, they turn toward the lostness with curiosity and compassion. They say, okay, this is what's happening right now. Let me look at this. Let me feel this fully. What is this experience actually made of? And they discover that when you stop fighting it, when you stop making it wrong, being lost isn't nearly as terrifying as you thought. Second, they practice what I call radical not knowing. They give themselves permission to be completely clueless, to have no idea what's happening or what it means or where they're going. They recognize that not knowing is actually more honest than pretending to know, more real than clinging to concepts and ideas that may or may not be true. And here's what's beautiful about this. When you really embrace not knowing, when you stop pretending you understand, you become available to learn in a completely new way, not learning as accumulation, not knowledge as possession, but learning as openness, understanding as emptiness, wisdom as the willingness to not know. Third, they remember what doesn't change. Even when everything else is in flux, even when clarity comes and goes, even when understanding rises and falls like tides, there's something that remains constant, something that's always here, always present, always aware. What is it? It's awareness itself, the knowing that's here regardless of what's known, the presence that's here regardless of what's present. The consciousness that's aware of being lost is the same consciousness that's aware of being found. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't get lost and found. It simply is. The awakened person rests this, not as an idea or concept, but as the direct recognition of what they already are. And from this resting, this relaxing into what's always been here, clarity naturally returns. Not because they forced it, not because they figured it out, but because clarity is the nature of awareness when it's not obscured by grasping and resisting. Fourth, they trust the process. They recognize that these cycles of clarity and confusion, understanding and not understanding, finding and losing, are part of the natural rhythm of awakening, like breathing, like seasons, like waves. There's an ebb and flow to it, and trying to hold on to the high tide of clarity is as futile as trying to stop winter from coming. The awakened person knows this. They know that confusion isn't failure. It's not backsliding. It's not a sign that something's wrong. It's just the next movement in the dance, the next note in the song, the next breath in the eternal respiration of consciousness knowing itself. And finally, they act anyway. Here's something crucial. Even though they're lost, even though they don't know, even though clarity is temporarily faded, they still engage with life. They still make choices. They still do what's in front of them to do. Because they understand that waiting until you're perfectly clear, perfectly certain, perfectly awakened before you live your life is just another way of avoiding life itself. The awakened person knows that you don't need to have it all figured out to take the next step. You don't need perfect clarity to be kind. You don't need complete understanding to be present. You don't need to feel found to live authentically. You just need to be here now with whatever is arising, doing the best you can with what you know. So here we are. Let me bring this home for you, because I want to make sure you understand what I'm really saying here. Being lost isn't the problem. The problem is believing that being lost means something's wrong, that it's a deviation from the path, that it's a sign you failed or fallen or lost your way. But what if being lost is part of the path? What if confusion is one of the ways consciousness explores itself? What if not knowing is actually a deeper form of knowing than all your concepts and ideas about awakening? The awakened person has made peace with this. They've stopped trying to maintain some permanent state of clarity. They've stopped treating awakening like a possession that can be lost or a destination that can be reached. Instead, they've recognized that awakening is more like a verb than a noun. It's something that happens moment to moment, a continuous process of seeing through illusion, letting go of clinging, resting as awareness. And sometimes that process includes feeling lost, includes confusion, includes not knowing, not as obstacles to awakening, but as part of awakening itself, part of the way consciousness wakes up to itself through every experience, every state, every moment. So the next time you feel lost, try this. Don't panic. Don't grasp. Don't try to force your way back to clarity. Instead, get curious. Turn toward the lostness. Feel it fully. Ask it questions. What are you made of? Where do you live? Who is experiencing you? And see what happens when you meet confusion with curiosity instead of resistance. Remember that the awareness that knows you're lost has never been lost. The consciousness that's aware of confusion has never been confused. You are not the thoughts that say you're lost. You are not the feelings of uncertainty. You are the awareness in which all of this appears. And that awareness is always here, always now, always clear. This doesn't mean the feeling of being lost will immediately disappear. It might not. But something changes in your relationship to it. You stop being at war with your experience. You stop making yourself wrong for feeling what you feel. And in that acceptance, that allowing, that willingness to be exactly where you are, you discover a freedom that doesn't depend on always feeling found. This is what awakened people do when they feel lost. They rest, they allow, they inquire, they trust. They act from not knowing rather than waiting for certainty. They use the lostness as a teacher, a mirror, a doorway into deeper truth. And gradually, not because they forced it, But because they stopped resisting it, clarity returns. Understanding emerges. The fog lifts. Not because they found their way back to it, but because it was never actually gone. It was just obscured by their belief that being lost was a problem that needed to be solved. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you feel lost on this path, remember this conversation. Remember that you're not broken. You're not failing. You're not backsliding. You're just experiencing another aspect of the infinite dance of consciousness, knowing itself. Another movement in the eternal play of form and emptiness. And in that remembering, in that recognition, you might just discover that you were never actually lost at all. You were just pretending to be lost so you could experience the joy of finding yourself again. Because that's what consciousness does. It hides from itself so it can discover itself. It gets lost so it can be found. It forgets so it can remember. And you, right now, in this moment, are that consciousness. Lost and found. Confused and clear. Seeking and already arrived. All of it. None of it. Everything and nothing at once. Welcome home.